I don't have any, I probably have some, but I'm not aware of it. I really don't have any personal, it doesn't bother me if you don't listen to the things I teach, okay? I don't care if you've never watched me on DVD. It's just never been a concern of mine. I know people do, I know all that, but so what I'm saying is, it would be nice if you would have watched what I presented at the camp meeting here recently. But, you know, I don't have hurt feelings if you didn't. It would have been nice that some of the things that were put in place there were already in your memory bank. Because what I've been doing here up to this point is trying to, and I haven't done a job that I think has been well, it just hasn't been. I've been trying to summarize a series that I've been going over for several weeks, even before the camp meeting, and get it to a place to where we can go a little bit further with the study and try to tie some things together that I've been doing over the past couple years maybe. But so the thing that I want to try to tie together, that I want to move forward with, I'm going to put on the board, but I'm going to also be referring to some things that we did, particularly here at the recent camp meeting with Hiram Edson and Samuel Snow as we proceed. But I'll tell you out front, I am having great pause, if that's the right word, for the things that I'm presenting, okay? Let me just walk through this. This history here, among other things, is the history of a hiding. Can you give me two witnesses for that? Elizabeth and fifth trumpet, okay? So we're going to mark the story of Zechariah and Elizabeth and the birth of John the Baptist beginning at 9/11. Okay, and Elizabeth is going to get pregnant and she's going to go into hiding for 5 months. And in the fifth trumpet, there is a time prophecy of 5 months that begins in July 27th, 1299, and goes to July 27th, 1449. So we have understood that this history here, this 150, is 5 months on two witnesses, and that in this history, it's a hiding because Elizabeth went into hiding during this time period. And we've come to understand that this 150 takes us to what waymark? Midnight. Okay. So in this history from here to here, one of the characteristics of this history is the hiding element. There's just to remind you, I won't dwell on this, but early on, this history here, one of the attributes that we've plugged into it that is valid and gives justification for what we're doing here is that Sister White identifies that there are two passages in the scriptures that the Millerites were convicted about that led them to produce this chart. What are those two passages? Habakkuk 2 and Ezekiel 12. So we've come to understand that in this history, because 9/11 was typified by August 11th, 1840. Do you believe that 9/11 was typified by August 11th, 1840? Okay, but because that's an issue in this movement when people start saying, Parminder's moving what Brother Jeff said at 9/11 down here to the Sunday law when the door closes, or whatever. It's an issue about whether you understand the justification for marking 9/11 at that point. And the issue is based upon the reform lines you're always going to see a divine symbol come down that marks the beginning of a testing process, the empowerment of that message. And that divine symbol comes down in advance of the door closing at whatever historical illustration of a door closing there might be. So you got many witnesses that August 11th, 1840 is typifying 9/11. And in 9/11, you have a mighty angel come down out of earth, come down out of heaven, and the earth is lightened with his glory. And what does he have in his hand? A little book. What justification do you have for saying that? In Revelation 18, the angel that comes down is not portrayed as having anything in his hand, and you just told me he had a little book in his hand. Yeah, it's the hidden manna, but what justification do you have for saying that that hidden manna is in his hidden hand? Because it's a repeat of history. You're almost there. Revelation 10, that's your third way there with Revelation 10. I'm not hearing you.
The testimony from the spirit of prophecy that says parchment.
Okay, there you go. In your notes, and you can all help me look for this in your notes. It'd be early on in your notes. You're going to see a rather long passage from the spirit of prophecy. I think it might even be early writings, where she's going to talk about these angels that come. And I'll dig it out for you if you haven't looked for it, but we really won't spend time on it. But in the book Early Writings, she's going to tell us that the second angel had some writings in his hand when he comes down, and the third angel, he has parchments in his hands, or vice versa. And we know that in Revelation 10, the first angel, when he comes down, he has a little book open in his hand. Anyone finding this? The passage where she describes the angels having come down is okay, go to page 45 of your notes. This isn't the one, because there is a place in these notes where I have all the references to the second angel and the first angel marked. But in page 45, the one for the third angel is there in the middle under 1844. I was making a different point with this. This isn't where I was really trying to find it. It says, as the ministration of Jesus closed in the holy place, and he passed into the holiest and stood before the ark containing the law of God, he sent another mighty angel with the third message to the world. So this mighty angel is the third message. This is the third angel's message. When does he come? When October 22nd, 1844. Ministration in the holy ends. He begins the ministration in the most holy. And an angel sent, he has something in his hand, a parchment in his hand. And I really should find the other passages to make my point. Okay, it's on page... No, it's not. It has to be early on. And there is also the possibility.
Is it under the latter rain?
Give me a page number. Page 53. Never mind. Let's not look for it. How many of you know that Sister White describes that when the second angel arrives, he has something in his hand? Okay, it's there in the book Early Writings. We've just read where the third angel arrives. He has a parchment in his hand. And I hope you understand that the pioneers identified the angel of Revelation 10 as the first angel. And when he came down, he had a little book open in his hand. So the reason that you know that the angel of Revelation 18 has something in his hand is based upon the testimony of three. The first angel's message, the second angel's message, and the third angel's message. When those angels arrive, they have something in their hand. And the information in Revelation 10 is that when that angel arrives, God's people are commanded to go and take that little book and eat it. Okay, and this has contributed a great deal of light to us in terms of what it means to eat it, carry the message to Adventism, not to the world, so on and so forth. But in Revelation 18, that angel comes down, and there is no indication in the verbiage of Revelation 18 that that angel has anything in his hand. But what we've come to understand is that he does have manna in his hand. It's hidden manna. And our justification for that is 3 witnesses. Those 3 angels all have something in their hand. And when the angel comes down, you could spend hours putting these characteristics in place. You realize that in these histories, when the divine symbol comes down, that's where the testing process begins, right? I mean, have you settled on that? When this comes down, there's a testing process that is underway in this, whatever particular history the divine symbol comes down. And I'm arguing that part of our testing process is the hiding. Because at 9/11, we've already identified that this angel of Revelation 18, what he has in his hand is hidden manna. And the manna is a symbol of the testing process. Because if you go into the study of covenant lines, you will find that at the beginning of ancient Israel, the symbol of the testing process was the manna. The manna that was given at the very beginning of the 40 years when they crossed the Red Sea, and that it ended at the very end of the 40 years. So you can illustrate the whole 40 years with manna over the top as a symbol of the test of that history. And that was the beginning of ancient Israel. And the end of ancient Israel is the time of Christ. And the symbol of the testing process in the time of Christ, when he confirmed the covenant with many for 1 week, is that he said, he didn't say, I'm the manna. He says, I'm the bread of heaven, which is the manna. So at the beginning of ancient Israel, the symbol of the testing process was whether you were going to eat the manna correctly that was given during that 40 years. Remember this story right off the bat. You can eat it incorrectly and be lost. And at the end of ancient Israel, because Jesus illustrates the end from the beginning, the symbol of that testing process that began at his baptism was the bread of heaven, which Jesus connects with the manna in the 40 years. There's a direct connection. And in Millerite history, the symbol of the testing process that begins on August 11, 1840 is that little book. So on 3 witnesses, the symbol of the testing process in these reform lines is what you eat. Whether it's manna in the time of Moses, eat my flesh, drink my blood in the time of Christ, or the little book in the time of the Millerites, our testing process begins when the divine symbol comes down, and it's represented by the bread of heaven, whatever it's going to be represented in that particular dispensation. And in our dispensation, it's the hidden manna, and that's what we're grappling with. If I wanted to be antagonistic to the truth that we're understanding now, the truth that we're understanding now is that we're involved with an info war between the king of the north and the king of the south. A year ago, if you would have asked us what prophecy was saying, how prophecy was going to portray the war that was about to take place in our history, we would have said it's a hot war. There's going to be blood, there's going to be bombs, there's going to be bullets. Now we're saying that it's not that type of war. We have prophetic justification for making this claim, by the way. It's valid. I'm not arguing against it. But this info war is something that requires you and I to do something that almost seems like a contradiction to the very basic things that we've been taught. I'll tell you one of the basic things that we've been taught. Most of you will know this. From the very beginning, for whatever reason, I thought I saw something in the spirit of prophecy that was the definition of what prophecy was, and I've used it and I've taught it that way all the way through. And it's a passage where Sister White says, historical events were set before the people, and prophecy was seen to be a figurative delineation of events leading down to the close of this earth's history. So when you break that apart, and you can break it apart in a diagram, and we did that hundreds of times, historical events. Here's some historical events. that I'm going to set before the people. And when you see these historical events in the context of a fulfillment of prophecy, the Holy Spirit's going to use that to speak to your heart that yes, these prophecies are fulfilling because this is the history that proves it. And therefore, whatever the implications of this fulfillment of prophecy is to us, the Holy Spirit can use that to bring us to where we need to be. That's the theory. But it's different now. I don't know if you thought this through. In this history now, 9/11, are we in a testing process? Okay, we got lots of witnesses, even if we don't believe it, we're in a testing process. What's the symbol of our testing process? Okay, that's pardon me? What is the symbol of our testing process that I just made the claim was the symbol of our testing process within the past 4 minutes? The symbol of the testing process in the time of Moses was what? The symbol of the testing process in the time of Christ was what? The bread of heaven. The symbol of the testing process in the time of the Millerites was? The little book. The symbol of the testing process for us is the hidden manna. This test here is food that is hidden. Manna is food, right? Okay, really? I thought manna was, what is it? Okay. So the testing food, the testing thing that we're supposed to consume in our history is truths that are hidden. So that's what we're dealing with. We're finding out in 2017 that the info war that is this warfare of the king of the north and the king of the south that leads to Raphia and then Peniam hasn't been recognized by us. It was fulfilling right before our very eyes, and we did not see it. Okay? And that's bad on us, I guess, for being poor students of prophecy. Perhaps not. That isn't my point. But it confirms the idea that what we're dealing with is prophecy that is hidden. Okay? So what we're doing now, if you've ever thought about it, let me give you an example. If you look at the news in the United States today, and you're not supposed to look at Fox News, you're not supposed to look at the conservative news, you're just going to look at the liberal news, but I'm saying if you look at the news today, both sides, if you look at both sides, you have the opportunity to argue that the world is identifying that there was no collusion between Trump and the Russians, okay? But this story of Ipsos is saying there was collusion. Okay, and I'm not arguing right now whether there was or there wasn't collusion. I'm using that as one point of reference. So, if you and I are going to teach that there was collusion by Trump with the Russians back in 2014, where do we mark this Ipsos? 16. 2016. Really? It was before that. Pardon me? Okay, but there was collusion before that, no?
2014 is when the beauty pageant was. 2016, I'm pretty sure, is marked as Ipsos. And
Okay.
2018. Yeah, they were.
Yeah, but the election, where you're speaking about the election and 2016, that's one way, Mark. But the collusion that supposedly places him into the election takes place before the election. That 2013, there you go. Okay, so but if you're here in the United States, or even in the world now, and you want to prove collusion, even the liberal press, it has lost its argument about collusion, at least here in the United States. They're talking about obstruction of justice now. They've kind of backed away from the Steele document. And so my point is, My point is, I'm not arguing about whether it was collusion or not. Is it in the olden days in this movement? Historical events were set before the people and prophecy was seen to be this, that, or the other. But now, the historical events that are the fulfillment of prophecy, your historical point of reference and your news reports that are going to prove that, they're not quite as secure, if that's the right word, as they were in the past. And the point I'm trying to make now is, rather than historical events being set before the people and prophecy is seen to be a figurative delineation of events leading down to the close of this earth's history, we're kind of at the point now to where we're saying prophecy is being set before the people to identify a hidden history. And the hidden history is what's allowing us to see this figurative delineation of events that are leading down to the end of this earth's history. So we're being tested in a different sort of way than these other histories were tested. And my argument is what one of my arguments is that what we're being tested about is our prophetic aptitude. Have we mastered the methodology, the understanding to be able to recognize this hidden history for what it is and make the correct preparation for what it is? Someone in here, one of you, I think, it doesn't matter who it was, but if you followed where we began, we said this 150 is put in place by the story of Elizabeth hiding her pregnancy for 5 months, and also by the 5 months of the fifth trumpet. And the 5 months of the fifth trumpet began on July 27th, 1299. So you would put that right there. 150 years later takes you to where? 1449, July 27th. Yes? And this is your starting point for what? 391 years and 15 days. It takes you out to August 11th, 1840. Some of us do not know that it is, at this point, there is no historical documentation for July 27th, 1449. There isn't. Okay, but you don't need it. I mean, it might be nice. But your starting point back here of July 27th, 1299, it goes all the way to August 11th, 1840. This would be, what, 541 years and 15 days? Is that what it is? 541? Don't hold me to this. It doesn't matter to make my point. We understand, based upon the 150 years of the fifth trumpet, that 150 years later take us to July 27th, 1449. But what I'm saying, brothers and sisters, you're going to be hard-pressed to find any history to uphold anything on July 27th, 1449. But it doesn't make the Pioneer application or our understanding not accurate, because you got these two things holding it together. By a 150-year time prophecy, you have the right to come here even if you don't have a historical event. Okay, so just one thing I want you to see is anyone in here prepared to give us a historical event for July 27th, 1449? Just to make sure. No one? Okay, so July 27th, 1449 would be right here. We're calling this what? What's going to happen at Raphia? I mean, if you want me to go out and preach November 9th, 2019, that's Raphia, Tell me what I'm going to tell the people is going to take place on November 9th, 2019 at Raffia. What's going to take place? The United States is going to experience a loss of some sort. Yeah. From the King of the South. Okay, we're adding a few things. I heard Russia. Okay. Okay. Russia and the United States are struggling for the control of the world, and we've come to understand, before we understood the hidden history of Ipsus, we've understood that this battle, Russia wins, and the next battle, the United States wins, right? So because we understood that this was warfare, we initially understood that this was going to be a hot war, right? This is a battle between the United States and Russia, and they got all the weapons in the world, so it's going to be ugly. But then we came to understand that it's an info war. Okay, so there's a war here in Raffia that Russia is going to prevail over the United States. What does that mean? I want to go out as a teacher of prophecy and be able to tell my audience, I have a warning about what's going to happen on November 9th, 2019. Here's the warning. And the input that we got from all of you is, at minimum, a bit vague.
Your elephants are stronger than ours.
They got stronger elephants than we do. Okay. So you're all familiar with the terminology that we're using with Ipsus. I just want to point out that the idea that we really don't know what goes on in Raffia is absolutely consistent with what we know about July 27th, 1449. What is it? Okay, so Tess, if I'm reflecting her warning, part of her warning correctly, she's saying in this history here, when this battle, this info battle begins, leading to Raffia, that the beginning of this warfare we didn't even see. It was hidden, and we didn't see it. I think she even put some guilt upon it. We should have seen it. We should have known it. We didn't. We need to repent for not recognizing it. That's a different subject. But if I'm understanding her correctly, she's saying as bad as it was for us not to recognize the beginning of this info war, it's absolutely essential that we catch up on the whole history of this hidden info war in order for us to be able to recognize Raffia when it happens. And it's only, the logic is, it's only those of us that are taking the time to wrap our minds around the characteristics of this info war in this hidden history that will have the aptitude to be on the right side of the issue at midnight. This is a testing process, but it's a testing process that is complicated by the fact that we're in a time of hiding. The hiding ends here, right? She's going to come out, and Elizabeth's going to come out in the open, and there's a new time prophecy. This here, for me, this is where I have great pause. If this is midnight, and this is the midnight cry, which long ago we understood to be Paneum, then one of the dilemmas that we have been working with is probation closes for the priests. This is the testing time of the priest. Probation closes for the priest at a point in time, at Raffia, end of the road. But probation closing for the Levites is progressive, beginning at the midnight cry and going to the Sunday law, perhaps. Then probation for the Nethinims begins to close progressively till Michael stands up. And then what happens? Now you have the harvest of the 144,000, and that's beyond dealing with the tricks of that one, because, you know, if the 144K here are being bound off, and they're priests and they're virgins, somehow, some way, the beginning of this process. Let's put it this way: how many categories of persons or category of groups are there up there? Three. How many believe three? Four. Isn't there? You got priests, Levites, Nethinims, and 144,000. Yeah, I'm saying I don't quite understand all of that, the dynamics, but I do like the idea, if you look at it on number 4, that they're priests at the beginning and priests at the end. Right? And so I just want us to you keep...
I'm just working it in my head.
Okay.
Aren't the 144 a combination of priests, Levites, and
Ooh. Simple answer outside the scope of this study is no. The 144,000 are virgins, Book of Revelation tells us, and Sister White in Great Controversy 393 says the parable of the 10 virgins of Matthew 25 illustrates the experience of the Adventist people. Anyway, we should understand these things, but can't understand all of them at the same time. So here's where I have pause. Okay, this is I'm using the word pause to mean I have some convictions about what I understand to be truth, but I kind of want to step back a little bit, even though I still hold those convictions, because some of the newer revelations are hard for me to conceptualize how they fit together. I'm not necessarily seeing that they are a contradiction to one another. I just don't have the aptitude to see how they fit together. So what I'm telling you is this. When this movement's prophetic message began to explode, if that's the right way to say it, is when Ezra 7:9 was introduced. That gave us a structure of 120 followed by 70. 9/11 to the midnight cry, 120, midnight cry to Sunday law, 70. Once we were there, it's amazing how many directions the Lord began to go with the prophetic message. And where was I going to go with that? Totally lost where I'm going. I'm sorry. That's becoming more and more typical. Now I remember where I was going to go. When Ezra 7:9 came into play, we introduced it. A sister heard it. That night she went home and she looked at every place in the scriptures where the first day of the first month was mentioned and the first day of the 5th month. And she shared it with me, and I put it in the public record the very next day in her living room. Okay? And once we did that, once we had that template in place, we were led to 2 Chronicles, among other places, 2 Chronicles 29 and 30. And in 2 Chronicles 29 and 30, it's Hezekiah, I believe. He wants to do a Passover. Let's go there, just make sure I got the king right. Hezekiah began to reign when he was 5 and 20 years old. That's the first verse of 2 Chronicles 29. And he wants to do a Passover. And Yep. And he's going to have the priests and the Levites repair the temple in advance of a Passover, and the verse I'm looking for is verse 17. When this work of preparing the temple is going to take place by Hezekiah, it says, "Now they began on the first day of the first month to sanctify, and on the 8th day of the 8th month came to the porch of the Lord. So they sanctified the house of the Lord in 8 days, and in the 16th day of the first month they made an end." So the first day of the first month, based upon Ezra 7:9, is 9/11. You follow that? So what we came to understand is that from 9/11 to the Sunday law, you have 16 days. 8 days, and I'm going to put the 8 here, although it's so out of proportion. This is 8 from here to here. And this is 8 from here to here. This is the 16 days of 2 Chronicles 29:17. And when we look at the passage in 2 Chronicles 29 and 30, it opens other doors, because the Passover that Hezekiah wanted to do was to take place on the 14th day of the first month. That's when Passover is. And they began on the first day of the first month, but they don't finish until the 16th day of the first month, which is 2 days too late to have the Passover. So they look into the record books, into the scriptures, and find that it's okay to have Passover in the second month. So there's all kinds of information there in 2 Chronicles 29 and 30. But what I want you to see is from this here, we came to understand in this movement that this first period of 8 was for the priest. Am I spelling that right? And the second was for the Levites. I have come to understand, and I have taught. If you're wondering what am I doing, I'm trying to tell you why I have great pause. I've understood that from 9/11 to midnight is 7 days, and that this is day 8. Okay. We had a problem early on. I had resolved the problem for myself, and maybe it is resolved. Maybe this is the resolution to this problem. But the problem that we had, if you haven't struggled with this problem, maybe you won't be able to understand it as I try to lay it out. The problem that we had is that we were finding evidence that probation closed for the priest simultaneously on all of them, one point in time. But it didn't work that way for the Levites or for the Nethinims. It was progressive. And the problem for us is we were seeing that the close of probation for the Levites begins at the midnight cry, progressive to the Sunday law, but the close of probation for you and I is a point in time here at midnight, and you suddenly have the period of time from midnight to the midnight cry that's a gray area. Here, probation closes for priests. Done. All this period of time, there's not a there's no probation closing here until you get to here. Now there's a probation closing that's progressive. So, what solved this for me is that I understood that this was the testing for the priests, and that Christ is our example. He is the high priest, but he was also the sacrifice. And therefore, in his history, when he was put on the cross, he was the first fruit offering, as the scriptures identify him. And I have come to understand that in this history here, from midnight to the midnight cry, you have a repetition of the cross, and that these priests, the faithful ones, are going to go on the cross in this history, and they're going to be the ensign out of this history to begin to call in the Levites. All right, and thereafter the Nethinims all the way through. Now, I could see the logic of what I was teaching. I still can. But if Raphia, let me just tell it like it is, if Raphia here is such a non-incident, okay, it's something, because what we're being taught about it, at least some people are saying this at a certain level, is that when Sister White comments on the close of probation in the Great Controversy, the close of probation for mankind in general, when Michael stands up, she tells us in Great Controversy that the people in the world will be carrying on in their day-to-day activities. They won't even know that probation closed in heaven. So if that is our point of reference for the close of probation, therefore when you come to Raphia, you shouldn't be expecting to see some kind of dramatic event that the whole world's shocked by, because they're not going to be shocked by it. They're just going to go along on their day-to-day activities. All right? Doesn't mean that the wise don't know what happened. In fact, the wise will be required to know what happened. In fact, what will demonstrate that they are wise is that they do know the truth about what goes on at this point in time. But this is what gives me pause. If the priests are the only ones that really know what's happening, before I seen some kind of event here at midnight where the faithful priests are put into such a crisis that they become the focus of public attention. And of course, this would agree with what I'm saying about a first fruit offering in the cross here, because Jesus says, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto myself. So the ensign part that I had been understanding is valid, but how do you have an ensign lifted up based upon a crisis that brings the wise to attention of the whole world? It's getting lifted up, and I think the cross is a symbol of persecution, so they're getting lifted up through some type of persecution. How can that be going on and no one notice it other than the people that are on the cross? Okay, so there's my pause. Do you understand my pause? Am I giving an accurate understanding of how you're understanding the info war? So the understanding of the info war being hidden up until this point, now it's no longer hidden in this history. So that would be qualify as an ensign. Something's lifted up. The part that gives me pause is, what happens here that at one level the world really doesn't see, but at the other level the wise priests see it, but at the other level the wise priests, at least in the glorious land, they're about ready to go on the cross because of persecution.
I see what you're saying, but I know most of our other waymarks are events that the world saw. 89, everybody saw that. 9/11, everybody saw that. Everybody was shaking at the election of Trump. So I think the world will see midnight, but it's probably that they don't actually understand what is actually happening. But we understand that.
Did everyone hear that?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wasn't trying to deny that. She's saying the world has seen every waymark that has went on, whether it's 9/11, 1989. They didn't know what it meant. Only the students of prophecy that are really studying would know what it means, and it's the same thing here. So I agree with that, but when you're bringing the concept in that these people in the world are just carrying on in their day-to-day activities and nothing's changed, if nothing's changed, what is it, how is it, if nothing's changed, that they're leading out and putting the faithful priests on a cross? Something must have changed. But I agree with you. You gave a very concise, accurate overview of what I was trying to say.
Adventism seems to know that we're time setting. That's got to play a role in the fact that nothing's going to happen that they'll see.
Okay, so you're saying We're predicting November 9th, 2019. They know it. So when this event comes,
Nothing's gonna happen that they see,
but we'll see it.
but we'll see it, and it's gonna cause a problem for us.
It's going to cause a problem for us because they're going to scoff at us. So you said the rain was coming and now you're in the ark and there's no rain for 7 days. So for 7 days, no rain as you're being tested on whether you're going to be faithful to your convictions about the hidden prophetic message. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, basically.
Okay, so,
You said it better.
well,
With the argument, that's correct. I think that's correct.
yeah, that's the logic. But I'm just telling you what I have pause for about it. There seems to be a disconnect about how the world doesn't really recognize what it is, but the world is somehow participating in the persecution that's going on, or maybe there's been an overemphasis on my part about the persecution that's about to take place.
Isn't this message for God's remnant people, the remnant church? Isn't this message about Adventism? Isn't this message supposed to point out the problems with Adventism, correct their errors? Isn't the end point of Raphia all about that dynamic change at that point in time between those that recognize Adventism's failures and the priests that are now preaching that message of failure? Isn't that where the persecution begins, and isn't that what Midnight points out?
Okay, now my sister up here, she's agreeing with you all the way through.
Not all the way, but.
But okay, but
So the
I didn't follow your logic all the way through, so I was going to sound it off with her too, but say it again.
Well, I think the I don't think anything, but it seems that the persecution would be coming from those that there is an attempt to correct their understanding of the everlasting gospel, the three angels' message. That persecution would then come from the nominal church towards those that are currently in this message that we understand. And that persecution, wouldn't that be not big deal to the world, but certainly would be a big deal to those in this message?
Everyone understand that? Okay, that's okay, but that isn't what we've taught in the past.
Okay,
Okay, what have we taught in the past, just so I don't have a problem with what you're saying. There's part of it that I think is absolutely accurate, but there's a bigger picture, and the bigger picture is, what we've understood about midnight is that Christ is our example, and at midnight, three entities are going to come: Judas, the Sanhedrin, and the Romans.
I agree, and that's where the Sanhedrin,
Adventism.
goes into an ally with the United States.
There you go.
And the persecution is enjoined by those two entities against.
No, there's three.
Somebody
Judas,
who is-
Judas,
Somebody who is
Judas is the
Judas, yeah.
Yeah,
okay, all right.
false priest.
False priest, all right. So I'm kind of getting the impression that, yes, there's going to be a persecution, a prosecution of those true believers at midnight, at Raphia, brought on by the nominal church in conjunction with the United States and their powers. Is that inaccurate?
Nope, that's my understanding.
Okay, so why would the rest of the world really care about that? There's some crazy people that think something, and we're going to take care of it and correct their.
Oh yeah,
And
but the world must care about it enough for the government of the United States to agree to do the bidding of the Seventh-day Adventist Church and come in and shut this movement down.
Well, because of the fomentation of revolution, I don't know.
Pardon me?
Fomentation of revolution of the.
Oh yeah, we've even got the details of what it will be. It'll be about taxes and insurrection. So that's what I'm saying. You're making my point for him. My point is this. We came to understand long before we understood the InfoWar that midnight had certain characteristics with it, and what I'm saying is the characteristics we understood about midnight show a government participating with an apostate church that's being directed by Judas, by false priests, to bring persecution upon faithful priests in the glorious land. But what I'm saying is when you plug that testimony into this, I'm arguing that right here, those faithful priests are lifted up as an ensign, and for me to be lifted up as an ensign means that it has to be a significant enough event that even those people that we're saying didn't really recognize Raphia, they're going to see something in what goes on in this history and the persecution against the faithful priests that begins to draw them into this subject.
And the $64,000 question is, why are those people being persecuted? They really didn't do anything wrong. Just some people are upset with them. The Sanhedrin is upset with some people, and they're using the government to persecute or prosecute their upset issues with these people. The rest of the world's going to say, well, wait a minute, why is that happening? Why would that happen?
Yes, probably. Yes, that's how I understand it too.
Would it involve the Constitution? Because, like, we have the freedom of religion, but if they're seeing people being persecuted for them exercising that, well, they don't know all that's going on, but if that can be intermingled in the mix of them just seeing the Constitution violated. We already see parts of it happening, but that can just be like...
I think you can make a case that all these waymarks from 1989 have a constitutional element in it. Sister Tess, when she's dealing with 2014, identifies Obama as a constitutional attorney. Okay, and there's some that have a problem with that because he never was a constitutional attorney. He had that label when he was teaching, but it was just a label. He never practiced constitutional law. So there's some people that stumble just over the way that Tess puts a label on Obama. But for me, that label has to be there, because he has the title, even if it's from an educational institution, as a constitutional attorney or whatever. And I don't care what he is, if he was a bad attorney, no attorney, or a good attorney, it's the word Constitution. This whole history at one level is about overturning the Constitution. So the fact that he's got that characteristic associated with him there in 2014, good. It's part of the overturning of the Constitution. All of these constitutional overturning as you step through the history that we're living in. Okay. Pardon me? He never practiced it, but anyway, in this history, now I have more reasons than you may realize that I want to go here. I'm letting you know out front that as I'm coming to these convictions, and how many of you have seen the presentations that I do on the number 8 and the first fruit offering? Okay, so this number 8 is also a symbol of what? Of resurrection, but what else? Of circumcision. You're to be circumcised on the 8th day of the week, and circumcision is replaced with baptism. So when we're talking about baptism today, one of the doctrinal truths that's overriding this history is baptism. And I've argued that this is part of the testing process, this issue of being baptized, and if we're not going to get baptized before November 9th, that we're probably failing one of the tests along the way before November 9th that we have to pass in order to pass November 9th. And that's based upon a very beginning principle in this movement in early writings where Sister White teaches, if you would not receive the message of John the Baptist, you could not be benefited by the teachings of Jesus, and therefore you couldn't see his transition into the heavenly sanctuary. And if you would not receive William Miller's first angel's message, you couldn't be benefited by the second angel's message. So we know that these testing processes are progressive, and we need to pass each test as they come to even be involved with the next test. So my argument is that this history, among other things, one of the testing issues is baptism, as represented by the number 8. And this history here, I'm saying, is the history of the cross, which includes the death, the resting in the grave, and the resurrection, which is baptism, this history, among other things. And so, the purpose of going here, I mean, if you've seen this study, one of the things that comes into it is the number 81. All right. 81 becomes, when does 81 get introduced into this movement? Does anyone know? Does anyone remember?
Pippenger in 2016?
Okay, you gave the date. I asked when, you gave the date. That's correct. I had the wrong question. No, I guess I can use that answer. That's what I was looking for. It's not until the Lord removed his hand from Raphia and Peniam that 81 becomes a symbol. Okay, because the Lord removed his hand there in Wales in December of 2016. And the week after he revealed that, we were in Holland, and I was presenting this message, and Pippenger was presenting this message, and it was there in Holland that he opened up 81, being midnight. Okay, so I'm wanting us to refresh our memory on why 81 represents midnight. It's associated with Raphia. Why is it associated with Raphia? Uzziah. Everyone know by the word Uzziah what we mean? The rebellion of Uzziah was also the rebellion in Daniel 11 that we recognized by the king of the south. We get second witness is Uzziah, the king of Judah, the king of the south, in a rebellion. But where do we get 81 out of Uzziah? Everyone remember? Uzziah wants to go into the temple and do the work of the priest, which he's forbidden to do. And how many priests protest him? 81. One high priest, 80 priests, 81. So we get the 81 from there, but this is from the light that we understood about what goes on at Raphia. Raphia is midnight, and we see these 81 priests at midnight. When the Lord opens up Raphia in December of 2016, the next weekend, we're in Holland, no longer in Wales, and Parminder's putting in place that the last general conference session that Ellen White ever attended in 1908, she was 81 years old, and then he began dissecting the various presentations that she did at that general conference session, what the subjects were, what they represented, and the history around that general conference session. And you could see that her age of 81 was marking this general conference session, which is 1908, and it was marking midnight. Okay, so midnight is 81. And they're at midnight, this is the thing, at midnight, when this persecution hits that's been illustrated by Ptolemy and Uzziah in terms of Raphia, they go out and they do a hardcore persecution, do they not? How many people die in Egypt from Ptolemy? 60,000. Okay, and then Uzziah, maybe not a hardcore persecution, but what happens to Uzziah? It's leprosy right on the spot. Okay, so it's a serious, both these witnesses about 81 are saying this event is serious. Okay.
Since you're there,
Okay.
we used to teach that, or maybe still teach that, the persecution was conducted by the king of the south against Adventists in Russia, didn't we?
Yep.
Is that in keeping with what you're saying here?
Yeah, I think we're still holding to that there's a, correct me if I'm wrong, those of you that might be further along in the test studies, but
Talking about America now.
at here, though the United States king of the north is defeated by Russia, the king of the south, it's still going to spur some kind of persecution in Russia, a religious persecution. I haven't heard that changed or corrected.
It's going on too. My husband told me that he heard it on the news the other day that they were persecuting Adventists and Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia.
There is a sister that is, connected to this message, and she's from Russia. She lives in Virginia or North Carolina, in that neck of the woods. And so she keeps more up on those things than you can get from the press, because she's getting feedback from her family there in Russia. And it's much worse than you can get from the press. Okay, she don't even, and this is for many months now, unless she's changed, she doesn't even speak to her family anymore because she knows that all the phone calls that are coming from outside Russia into the Russians are being monitored. And if she's going to say something of the wrong nature to her family, then they're going to be in trouble.
Particularly in
Crimea? Particularly in Crimea. But anyway, even if it's going on now, we're saying that it's something that gets marked, the event taking place here. We're talking about in advance of, but it's, you got the logic, you can see it's underway.
I'm running low on time. I forgot to put a new card in. Can we possibly pause for a minute here? Or
Yeah, you're the boss.
This is not a good place to pause.
Can you pause?
We paused, I just have a little statement. 24 years ago, there was a siege on Waco, Texas, against a very small minority of religious people. And it was a local thing, and it became a very worldwide event, and government went after these people in such a tragic way. But from what I understand, it was the General Conference that alerted the government.
Yes.
So that's kind of a typified idea of what we might be looking at here.
Then you would have the date when that happened?
It was February, it was a 51-day siege. It was from February to March.
I thought it was April, because isn't that when Timothy McVeigh did the 2 years later thing?
The Oklahoma.
It was February 28th to April 19th, 1993.
To April 19th?
April 19th,
19 what?
1993.
Yeah, we pointed that. It was a secretary of the General Conference that reached out to Janet Reno and said that there's some heretics.
That became a worldwide event.
Yeah, and
The whole world was involved with it.
the Constitution got overturned there.
Yes.
Because you're not supposed to use foreign armies in the United States.
Well, use the Army too. You're not supposed to use the Army.
You're not supposed to use the Army either, but if you got British helicopters there, anyway. Are you?
Ready when you are.
I'm ready. Are you ready, my brother?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, ask a question.
So, for the priests at midnight in here in the U.S., the glorious land, that persecution's for them, even though the probation closes for all of us simultaneously worldwide. Or will it happen the other part of North America too, at midnight, or Africa or England or wherever? Because I always thought.
Did you hear that question? This is why sometimes you don't want the Canadians to ask questions. They're hard questions, all right? I don't have an answer for that. Her question was, say it again so we can get it in the record. I know it. If persecution is going to come upon the faithful priests in the United States at midnight, what are the implications for the faithful priests in Canada or in some other country? Does their probation close? We're teaching their probation closes for priests, but are they going to be arrested and taken into custody like we're at least inferring takes place in the United States? And that's one of the hard questions that comes out of this prophetic model. But I don't have a good answer for that.
Haven't you always said that Fox News is broadcast in the United States only? Doesn't make it
I know I got corrected on that, but I still stand by my position.
Well, I think in general you're correct on that.
Yeah.
And so it is a persecution that is going to be in the United States. Doesn't that infer that?
Yeah. But then it goes all to the.
Yeah, I agree with the premise that we've taken that the United States is the first to be tested, and the Adventists in the United States are the first to be tested, and that's based upon Abram's prophecy of Egypt, which we are repeating. We are first judged at several levels that you want to illustrate, and therefore we have some kind of judgment in advance of the other priests outside the United States. What I was told after I said Fox News is only for the United States is that you can get it on cable around the world, and she says she's watched it up in Canada, but that's the point. You got to pay for it around the world if you're going to get it at all. You got to have a cable. You don't have to do that here. Yeah, some places.
Fox News is just not allowed there.
Anyway, maybe. What is it?
Do you know of people involved in this movement in Russia? Are there people who you classify as priests in Russia right now?
Do I know of? No.
No, okay, I just wondered.
I do believe, I know they are by faith, because I know of past activities that there's fruits for that kind of activity, but I don't know any personally. Okay. You mean Russia or the Russia bloc?
The land of the King of the South, are there people who understand what we know there that you are in touch with?
Why is this important for you to understand?
Go on, since we're there, I was just curious.
Is that important for anyone else other than Paul to understand? Okay, because I have an answer for that, but it's not a direct answer, and sometimes people want to hear that answer. Okay, so there are places on planet Earth where this message has went big and then died out. Okay, and there's places where it hasn't really went big, but there's evidence that it's going on its own steam somehow. So I have information about places like that lead me to believe by faith that those kind of things are happening. You know the Korean story. There's a similar story, the Korean story, when all the pastors in Korea studied this message. All the pastors in South Korea studied this message. That also happened in the Ukraine. Okay, and in the Ukraine, when they called in the pastors and we had that study, they were all under conviction, we want to get the Time of the End magazine translated. And then they handed it off to their translators in the Ukraine, and those Adventist translators said, well, we're not so sure about this teaching, but we'll send it to the Adventist University in Russia. And I was still hearing reports when it got to Russia, to that university, the translators there said, hey, this is really good stuff. We're translating it. And they translated the Time of the End almost immediately. This is many years ago. So there was a point in time where in Russia, this message was recognized, actually translated into Russia by Adventist leadership. I don't know what happened afterwards. Okay, so I have stories on the other side of that too. Okay, 81. I'm wanting to remind us why 81 is associated with Raphia. 81 priests, 80 priests, 1 high priest, 1908 General Conference session, midnight. But I want you, if you will, to think about the fact that in early writings, page 81, you have William Miller's dream. Okay? Because in William Miller's dream, there comes a point in time where the dirt brush man takes all these jewels, and what does he do? After he gathers the jewels up, what does he do, according to William Miller? He casts them into the casket, okay? Because I'm arguing that in Revelation 8, verse 1, you have the opening of the 7th seal, and in the story of the opening of the 7th seal, which I'm saying takes place in this history, you're going to have fire taken from the altar and cast down to the earth. And I'm saying you can make a case and show that this fire is a symbol of the same kind of experience as Pentecost, when tongues of fire were upon those recipients of the fire that was cast down. So I'm saying in this history, this is where William Miller's jewels are all returned to that casket, and what are they going to do? They're going to shine 10 times brighter from this point going on. But when I say that, it's going to cause people heartburn. Why? Because we understand that October 22nd, 1844, something began to sound. What was it? The 7th trumpet. So we associate the 7th trumpet with the 7th seal. I don't have a problem with that. But what I'm saying is some people may very well want to mark 2014 as the opening of the 7th seal. And if you're opening the seventh seal here, that's okay. But if Brother Jeff's saying the seven seals opened here, you got a contradiction. But it isn't a contradiction for me, because from the very beginning of dealing with the seals, I understood and taught, this is what I understood, that the seals were a progressive illustration. You go into the pioneer understanding of the seals, it wasn't pointing, what fulfilled the seals in the pioneer understanding was not a point in time history, it was a period of time. Okay, it was progressive. So I describe the opening of the seventh seal as the removing of a Band-Aid from a sore. You're going to pull it off, but what I'm saying is right here is where you finally reach the point, I got to get it off. And you take that Band-Aid all the way off. So here is the full removal of the seventh seal. I'm not arguing that it didn't begin to get removed back here. Why would someone want to put it there? Well, one of the reasons is October 22nd, 1844 can line up with 2014. And this is where the seventh trumpet begins to sound, and this is where the mystery of godliness, Christ in you, the hope of glory, is finished in this history of the sounding of the seventh trumpet. And I'm saying that it's corresponding also with the removal of the seventh seal. So I want you to see, if you will, I'm claiming that in this history of midnight, from here to here, would this all be midnight? Or is it just here? It's right in the middle. This is midnight. This is midway of midnight. You may wonder why Brother Jeff asked such a stupid question. But if you were not up on this, you would not realize this is one of the arguments. Is midnight a point in time or a period of time? Which is it? So we can move forward. Okay, it's both. This is midnight, but is this midnight? Okay, all right, so we're all on the same. It's all the midnight cry. Same message at Boston, at Concord, at Exeter, all the midnight cry message. It's a progressive message. So I'm arguing that here, in this history, you have Miller's Jewels, among other things, fully restored. Early writings, page 81. And one of the elements of that dream is the casting of the jewels. I'm just put casting. And go to Revelation 8, verse 1, just to walk through this. Of course, everyone knows about the 7.5, right? I haven't heard any of the other teachers teach this, and it always makes me wonder, you know, so the truth comes to the surface in this movement in the past. Like, you know, the sister finds all the references to the first day of the first month and the first day of the fifth month. She shares them with me. That very day, I put it in the public record. And from that point on, everyone that's publicly teaching this message, they're teaching Ezra 7:9, Ezra 7:9, and they're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing it. And it's happened on several teachings through the years. A new subject comes to light, it's like George Seaman. He comes to the argument I gave you this morning, that at the end of the Reform movements, there's an element of time that's introduced just before the close of probation. Someone like me sees that, says, I'm going to make that my message too, and I repeat it. That happens repeatedly in this movement with certain subjects, but on this particular subject here, I don't hear anyone repeating it, so that also gives me some pause, okay? So, anyway, if you haven't looked at the 7.5 and the 8, no one else that I know of is out there echoing this. I would like to be corrected if I need to be corrected. But in verse 1 of chapter 8, it says, and when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of a half an hour. What's a half hour?
7 days. 7 days.
Pardon me?
7 days.
7 days. I mean, if you go by, a year
Are you following her? Okay, what's
360 is a year, and a half an hour is 7 days. Either that or.
Yeah, because
No,
15.
no, because an hour is 7 days, right?
No, an hour is 15.
No, hour's 15 days,
Okay.
no, actually, yeah, hour's 15 days, yeah.
3.5.
Now, I have a problem with Brother Paul sometimes because when he enters into the mathematical stuff, I expect a little bit of clarity because this guy's one of these mathematician guys. You just told me that an hour is 15 days, so a half hour is 7 days. What kind of math is that?
It's we're under 7 days.
How about 7.5? Okay, because the first thing verse 1 tells us is 7.5. And I'm saying that there's 7 days from 9/11 to midnight, and that there is references to 7.5 that take us right to the center of this particular history. I'm saying this history is 8, but this is 7, but there is a witness of how long David reigned in Jerusalem, how long it took Solomon to build the temple, that gives 2 witnesses on both those subjects. David reigned for 7 years. It took 7 years to build the temple. No, David reigned for 7.5 years. It took 7.5 years to build the temple. And I'm saying you can plug both those stories, David and Solomon's temple, in here, and it takes you to 7 right here at midnight, but it projects you to 7.5, halfway through 8. So if you're not seeing that 7.5, then you might do what Paul says and says an hour is 15 days and a half hour is 7 days. But it's not. It's 7.5 days. Okay? 7.5 takes you to, let's put half and half. And in the midst of the week. So you got 27 AD, 34 AD, and right here you got 31 AD. So what do you have from here to here? You got 1260. Pardon me?
Resting for insurrection and blasphemy.
Oh, yeah. In this history here, you're going to have persecution that ends up with the faithful on the cross. But you got a half here and a half here, and if you're going to deal with what Brother Pence just said, he's saying that this history here is also the history of the cross. I agree with that. And if this is the center of a history of the cross, the place where the cross is the center of the history is the week that Christ confirmed the covenant. Thus, this would be 27. This would be baptism. This would be cross. This would be resurrection at that level, I guess. And so I just want you to see the 7.5. Why do I want you to see the 7.5? Because in verse 1 of Revelation 8, it says there was silence in heaven for about the space of a half an hour. Therefore, would there be silence right here? That's what I'm saying. That there's silence right there. And we've already went through in the past and identified why there is silence in heaven. Why is there silence in heaven? Heaven is observing what? What's happening on earth, but is he observing a tennis match that's going on? It's when heaven is observing a major salvational event. When Christ was on the cross, all heaven was silent. When Adam and Eve sinned, there was silence in heaven. On the Day of Atonement, there's silence in heaven. So I think there's 5 different clear witnesses in the spirit of prophecy that the silence in heaven can be understood as when there's a major salvational event taking place, heaven stops and watches. Okay, not only because they're a witness, but because they're emotionally, intellectually engaged in that very subject. So what does that tell you about this history if this is accurate? Whatever is going on from midnight to the cross in this history is a major salvational development, right? and heaven is watching it. What is going on? The binding off of who? I thought the priest got bound off over here. So which is it? Okay. I raised some of these counter questions because I'm just acknowledging points that are unresolved.
The priests down there lived through all of it. Some of the priests up here.
Yeah, maybe she's saying the priests down here are going to live through it. They're not going to taste death. But these priests, one of the differences is that some of them will be laid to rest before the Lord returns. Okay. Silence, heaven. Verse 2. And I saw 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. Brothers and sisters, who are those 7 trumpet angels? Okay, they're also the 7 plagues. Take the 7 trumpets of Revelation 8 and 9. List their characteristics in a column on the left side. Then take the 7 vials that are poured out in the 7 last plagues and list them sequentially 1 through 7 in a column on the right side, and you'll see that the characteristics of the first trumpet is the characteristics of the first plague, so on and so forth. Therefore, the trumpet angels are the angels that pour out the 7 last plagues. Okay, but now that being said, that wasn't what I was getting at. Let me ask it this way. What brings the 7 trumpets into history? The Sunday law. Okay, explain that to me. How many Sunday laws are there?
Yeah, 321, 538.
And that's Sunday law.
No, okay, so you're going, there are 2 that I'm looking for.
21 and 538.
Yeah, okay. No, let me explain my question. 321 is Constantine's first Sunday law. 538 is the Synod of Orleans, when the papacy passes a Sunday law. But we're talking about the 7 trumpets. What does the 7 trumpets have to do with this?
Because when they made a Sunday law in 321, that's when the first 4 trumpets began to go down on.
So what are the trumpets? They're God's judgments against Sunday law. Okay, these 4, the first 4 trumpets, are going to bring to a conclusion Western Rome by 476. But the reason that they're punishing Rome is because of the Sunday law in 321. And in 538 there's a Sunday law. And the next 2 trumpets, the 5th and the 6th, are going to deal with the papacy's Sunday law. They're all judgments for the Sunday law. Do you follow me? So what am I saying about Revelation 8 and the 7th seal? I'm saying the 7th seal gets opened in this history. There's silence in heaven for about the space of a half hour. And I'm saying, I haven't given you all the justification for me plugging this into here. But in the back of this history, what is Christ telling us in verse 2? That behind the scenes, behind here, what's hanging over everyone's head are these, this is a trumpet. And this is 7 of them. Are these 7 trumpets? Do you see that? It's saying, and I saw 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. So what I'm saying, if you're willing to see it, is in this history, you're on the verge of the Sunday law crisis, but it isn't here yet. Okay? 321 has not happened. 538 hasn't happened. They're on the horizon. You're to understand this history that in the background, 7 trumpet angels are waiting to sound. When will they sound? At the Sunday law. When's the first Sunday law? Right there. Midnight cry, first Sunday law in the United States, leading to the Sunday law. So right where you would expect the judgment of the Lord to come into history because of the Sunday law crisis, in verse 2 you can see these trumpet angels that are God's judgments for Sunday legislation standing there ready to go. And I'm saying it's at the end of this history here that it all begins. So you see the logic that it fits. It fits, even if this is some kind of wresting of the scripture. This fits our logic. Verse 3. And another angel came and stood at the altar having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it unto the earth. And there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. And the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. I'm saying in this history here, there's a casting, and it's fire, and it's in response to prayer. It's in response to prayer. Why would I say it's in response to prayer to those of you that have seen this study before?
It's golden altar.
Oh, the
incense.
Yeah, it's where they're at. All that prayer is symbolized by that, but that's not why. That's not why. Pardon me? Persecution? That's not why either. This must be a real poor question. Yeah, pardon me? Louder.
Lining it up with Pentecost.
Lining it up with Pentecost? No, but Pentecost. Yeah, the fire we can line up with Pentecost. Okay, I'll just tell you my answer because you're not understanding my question. No, you're not understanding my question, any of you. My bad question. In this particular study that we did in the past with the 7 and the 7.5, we've shown that in this history, the temple is being built and a priesthood is being purified and prepared to serve. And also a sacrifice is being prepared. Because Christ was both a priest and a sacrifice, and this is Christ. So if we go into Moses' tabernacle temple and Solomon's temple, in the dedication of the temple, there are how many manifestations of the power of God? There's 2. And does everyone know that, or just the third table? Does everyone know that in those stories of the dedication of the tabernacle or Solomon's temple that there are distinctly 2 manifestations of the power of God? What are they? And in what order are they?
Does he come to the door and then he enters into the thing? Is that how it works?
No, that's not what I'm getting at.
Smoke and then fire.
Okay, here's... I really don't care if you listen to the presentations that I do in the public arena, but this I have labored with. You probably have heard it, and it's just went over. It's not there right now, but when Solomon's temple or Moses' tabernacle is prepared, it's finished, it's ready to use, then there is a manifestation of the glory of God that takes place in the temple itself, right? And it's so intense that anyone that's in the temple has to leave. So there is a manifestation of the power of God in the temple, and then there is a manifestation of the power of God where else? On the sacrifice, the sacrificial offering that the priests are going to make. In this history, the priests are going to be prepared to be cleansed. They're going to be purified, cleansed. That's not the word the scriptures use. It's like sanctified or... No. Anyway, they're prepared for 7 days. What do they begin to do on the 8th day? They begin to function as priests. So when you get to midnight, what are you going to do if you're faithful? Function as priests. But what are you also? You're an offering. So you also have to be prepared as an offering. And what does that mean? This is the part that I have pause on. What does that mean? You have to be a sacrifice. But who's the example of the sacrifice? Did he have to be made into a sacrifice?
He gave himself a willing sacrifice.
He gave himself willingly. She says, no, he didn't have to be made a sacrifice. She's easy to pick on. Did he have to be made a sacrifice? Yes. How?
Because he had to take on humanity and die.
Yes, he had to take on humanity because divinity cannot die. His incarnation was part of his work to be a sacrifice. Without the humanity, he couldn't have died at the cross because his divinity did not die. So before the cross, Christ had to be prepared to be a sacrifice. So before the cross for the priests in our history, what has to happen to you and I? The incarnation. We have to be settled into the combination in humanity and divinity and our own experience before that history. Okay, so there's a preparation for us to be a sacrifice, a preparation for us to be a priest. There's a temple that's being prepared. When is the temple finished in our history? Probably a trick question, but when was it finished? 2014. Here the foundation and the temple is finished. Everyone aware of that? Anyone unsure about that? Is 2014 typified by October 22nd, 1844? Can you show that? You understand that? So on October 22nd, 1844, where are you at in terms of the two 2520s? One 2520 ended in 1798, and the one we're looking at ends in 1844. So where are you at? The end of what? You're at the end of that period of time in that chiastic structure. And from 1798 to 1844, how many years is it? 46. What's 46 a symbol of? The temple. Why are we saying the temple is finished in 2014? Because it's October 22nd, 1844, and it brings with it the completion of the temple. Temple's completed here. You follow me? There's bigger logic than this. Are you with me? So the temple is going to be completed. What's going to happen now? Well, there's going to be a manifestation of the power of God. Before here. Before midnight, right? What's the next manifestation of the power of God? Midnight, when the sacrifice, when the priests begin to function. That's the second one that's in those histories, is it not? Okay, so that's a connection with Miller. I'm trying to make a connection with Miller's dream. This is all matter of public record. So we probably put in place enough to move back in briefly when we come back to the history of Hiram Edson, Samuel Snow, and bring this history into that thought, including this. This is something that we've never done, is tried to include this, but I've given you fair warning that my conviction about that study is still sound. But it's more difficult for me to understand, conceptualize the persecution that takes place at midnight. I'm not thinking that it's not going to happen, but anyway, I've said enough about that.
If people are falling away all throughout if people are falling away all throughout the way to the end, throughout each waymark, then is 144,000 the church is that the final? I'm trying to understand the church triumphant, because if you have people falling out, then the church triumphant isn't complete, right? Or
No, then I would. if I could insert my idea into your thought, then you would say the church triumphant isn't the church triumphant. If you're using the definition of the church triumphant as a church that has no tares, only wheat, then it appears that the church triumphant would probably only be the 144,000. That's what you're saying, because we have testimony that people are falling out all the way. But that testimony, that statement, I haven't looked at it for a while. I'm familiar with that. As I remember it, it's like you can read it all the way to the second coming, which kind of challenges your concept. Maybe I'd have to go look at it again, and maybe you have a reason to stop it at the close of probation. I don't know.
That's the question, I'm just.
State the question one more time.
Well, is the church triumphant complete? Does 144,000 complete the church triumphant? Is that the church? Is it complete at that time? Or because you have people falling out all throughout the way, and I'm wondering, you have the church militant and then the church triumphant, and it's not complete if you still have tares in it, right? And people are falling out. So
I have a hard time on my understanding of that, because I was incorrect in my understanding of the church triumphant that I had for years, that being that the church triumphant is strictly wheat. Then when the Lord used Pippenger to show that the building of this temple, the building of this work here, that there are both wheat and tares that participate in the work, I got that. But still, there comes a point in time where this church is lifted up as an ensign, and it's hard for me to be shaken from the idea that at that point it isn't the pure church only wheat. I mark that at the midnight cry. From this point on, the Levites that come in, they're not going to come in and sin and repent. They're coming in as wheat, and they stay as wheat. But we have an exception to the rule, which is what you're pointing to, is that we have a statement that there's people falling off all along the way. So it kind of causes a problem for that definition that I'm setting forth. But I dodge those kind of problems by saying that the exceptions to the rules do not govern the rule, and that's on a variety of things. I used one already here since in these meetings with William Miller. We all understand William Miller rejected the message of the midnight cry. He rejected the outpouring of the Holy Spirit and called it a delusion. And Sister White says all those that rejected the latter rain and called it a delusion, they closed the door of their probation, and she puts it in the context that they're lost. But we know that Miller isn't lost. He's the exception. He's an exception to that rule. I don't think that his historical testimony for us eliminates the overall teaching. And it's the same with the church triumphant. I'm understanding that from the midnight cry onward, the church triumphant is in place, and there's no more tares in it forever. But you have that statement. There's other little nuances that will challenge that.
So who are the two sticks?
So the question is, who are the two sticks? My question back to you is, why are you asking that? Where are you going with that? I don't want to go one direction on the two sticks if you're really asking about this direction.
Because I'm asking that because the agricultural model, it says the Bethlehems come in differently than where we originally said, and who the two sticks were, where we originally said they were coming. So that's what I'm asking.
Okay, so I'm not familiar with that nuance. How do the two sticks get joined in the agricultural model that I'm not understanding?
It's not stated clearly yet.
What's not stated clearly?
Sister Tess is laying out in several presentations Ezekiel 37 and the uniting of the two sticks being at the Sunday law down at midnight cry, and that they are the 10 tribes from the 10 nations, and that's when they come in. But that since they're made up of Nethinims, no Nethinims we know come in before the Sunday law. Speak up.
Okay, well, she said Sister Tess is teaching that the two sticks come together from the Sunday law onward.
Right.
not from the midnight cry to the Sunday law. But what does that mean? Is that exactly what she means? Is she saying that what we've taught about the two sticks being joined from the midnight cry to the Sunday law is erroneous? No, I mean, if she says otherwise and she makes no comment whatsoever, then you have the right to interpret that she's saying what we formerly taught was erroneous, but not necessarily so. She may just be teaching a concept about the joining of the two sticks that is not necessarily a denial of what we've understood about the two sticks from midnight cry to the Sunday law. And as an example of that possibility, we've already had that in here where she's teaching the Republican horn is overcome at the election in 2016, but we know that horn has to have been conquered also at 9/11 because that's the first day of the first month. And if you're going to move the conquering of the horn forward to 2016, then you just remove the waymark of 9/11 and you destroy it all. So I'm not even for a second believing that when she's saying the Republican horn is conquered in 2016, that means that she's saying that what we've taught about the Republican horn in 9/11 is incorrect. I'm understanding her to say that it's a progressive development of the conquering of republicanism, and she's focusing on 2016 because that is a waymark that's part of the Ipsos story. So if I can give her that amount of grace on that subject, I would have to hear her face to face tell me why the two sticks aren't joined from the midnight cry to the Sunday law, because we've always understood it was progressive. And if she's just speaking about the progression of when they come in, that's exactly what I put on the board. They come in, this here is the Nethinims. Probation closes here, it's closing progressively. But where is it that they're getting prepared? Where are the Nethinims getting awakened to the issues that they have to prepare for? Back here. So is this not where the two sticks are getting joined? But here is where they're actually coming together. Is she rejecting that overview that I just gave, or is that just something we can read into what she's saying?
So I was just thinking before, when you said between midnight and Sunday law, that's what you meant, just that, within that space.
For what?
The joining of the two sticks. But it's longer, it's wider than just midnight to the Sunday. You said the Sunday law.
Yeah, I don't. When I have taught the joining of the two sticks, I can't say for certain that I always said it was progressive, but I've never thought that this is the joining of the two sticks of Adventism and the 11th hour workers, and that when you get to the Sunday law, it's all over. I've always believed the 11th hour workers come in post Sunday law. But the joining of the two sticks it begins back here. This is the plowing. They're getting, I don't want to say plowing if it would be, yeah, okay. But anyway, this is an advanced preparation for the Nethinims to understand the issue here. And in that sense, we first understood that the two sticks were joined from midnight cry to the Sunday law, and it had to do with 11th hour workers and Adventism. But this is also parallel kingdoms, not just for the 11th hour workers and the priests and Levites. It's also a parallel kingdom for who? This is the 6th kingdom and 7th kingdom. There's a parallel transition going in here. So this history, on more than one witness, is where these two sticks are coming together. Now, it may not be teaching that they're totally together by the end of this period, but I would have a hard time thinking that you eliminate that from the call of the Nethinims. Does everyone know what we're talking about with two sticks?
I've heard it.
You've heard, okay. All right.
He's working out for me.
No, well, I think we've got it worked out. Are we good? So we'll have a prayer and we'll pray for food. And when we're done eating, then we're going to caravan. Is that what's going on?
Yeah.
And we want to be done eating by what time?
We want to be able to be leaving to drive there at least by 2:40. Takes like 14 minutes to get there, so we want to be able to gather up into cars, carpool the best we can.
Just keep in mind, if we only have one changing room,
I know.
20 people. I'm not sure if you're counting that in, if you're expecting the baptisms.
20 people would be nice. We're way beyond 20 people.
Okay, well,
Well,
I'm just
no,
saying,
that's
I'm just
because I
saying
said
as
some
far as-
people can change here now.
it's just my
Yeah,
experience.
can people change ahead of time?
Some of us can change here now and go over there in our gowns if we want, maybe. If nobody feels weird about that.
I don't want to get a ticket in a baptismal gown, but go ahead if you choose to.
You can ride in your own car, and we'll ride in a different car, I guess.
There is a place to change over there, right, Elaine?
Yes,
Yep.
you did say there is a bathroom.
But evidently only one place.
Probably just one bathroom. So we need to be quick change artists.
Okay.
I'm just saying, my mind just says, keep that in mind, the time it takes to change. And get everybody changed in.
So we have an hour and 15 minutes to meet Elaine's schedule to leave here at 2:40.
How long do you have scheduled for the actual service at baptism, Jeff?
2 hours from start to
2 hours?
But start being what, the time
3
of
to 5.
done?
The time we go through the vows, the baptism, and we finish.
It won't take more than a minute, maybe 2 minutes per person, right? Not even 2 minutes. I haven't ever time to.
Vows takes long.
Yeah, that's what I say.
That's what I was.
You have to read the vows. That takes about probably 10 minutes, depending on who's reading it.
That's a group thing.
Yep, and everyone's saying amen as you go through, and then you get in, and it really, in a swimming pool, it's going to go fast. We've been doing things we have to climb into individually. In a swimming pool, everyone that's going to be baptized, in theory, I haven't seen the swimming pool, can get in that swimming pool and be standing there in the water waiting to be next. No, depending on temperature. If it's really super cold, that's even more reason that you need to get in right from the start, all right?
So if it goes a little longer and we had to cancel our last meeting tonight, I'll leave that up to everybody else.
Yes, but what I'm telling you, I don't think it's going to go that long. Once you start baptizing the people, it just is not that long of a process. The longest part of it is the reading of the vows, or the driving there, the changing, reading the vows, do the baptism, change clothes, and get back here. I don't think it will be that long.
She's got a little suggestion for us ladies, we can slip on our under stuff that we want.
And just put our skirts back on.
Put our skirts back on, get over there and take,
Yeah,
quicker
put the
change.
gown on.
If you wanted to here before we go, like during lunchtime, whatever, slip our leggings on underneath what we have on it currently. Then we won't get arrested wearing baptismal gowns.
I don't know that I'm going to get a ticket, but do you want to get pulled over in a baptismal vow?
They make it a stand.
They might let you off.
They might let you off, or they might call the psych ward or something.
Will you make the robes available here then?
There
For
will-
those that would like to change
They
here?
probably are here, and I have the ones that I brought here. that Captain Pippenger has.
I don't know, I don't have.
We brought them in when we got here. They're back there somewhere.
So they're here somewhere.
Okay.
So whoever's got them, we'll make sure they're available to us.
I guess
all.
I'm gonna get
What
pulled
is
over
there
with
enough?
somebody wearing a baptismal armor.
We gotta
So
pray
just
for
make
the
sure that during lunch,
So-
we kind of make sure we get those things ready. And we want to gather outside probably by 2:30.
All right. Jeff, did you want to have a closing prayer?
Okay, and I'll also pray for the food.
Sorry for the disruption.
Not a problem. No disruption. Okay. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the prophetic light that you are opening to us. We thank you that you've given us the calling to be among those that grapple with these ideas and attempt to, through the power of the Holy Spirit, bring them into our life, into our experience. We ask for your continued leading along this line. We thank you for the souls that are recognizing the seriousness of the times in which we're living and the necessity of publicly demonstrating a covenant relationship with you at this time. We ask that the ceremony that we're about to head into would be a blessing for them and a glory for you, and be used by you to further your work further this message in some way or means. And as we break now for the physical food, we ask a blessing upon it. Ask that it would strengthen us to serve you the rest of this day. We pray for a blessing upon the hands that have prepared it, and we ask a blessing upon those people that have prepared these meetings and the baptismal ceremony here this day as well. And we thank you for all these things. In Jesus' name, amen.